Worst characters.
Worst characters.
Worst.
What is that?
This is a bit of a mind fuck. I really want my name on that trophy, but I do not want to talk about Jar Jar Binks for 3 weeks. Jar Jar.
Look at how excited this is. Truly.
I gotta take Ruby Rhod from Fifth Element.
Oh!
Hey everybody, and welcome to some thrilling first round action of Worst Wars, the tournament that is a little backwards. Because when you vote at the end of this thing, you're voting for who's the worst.
Yeah, this could
Not
be a little
who's the
confusing.
best, who's the best at being the worst. T has Jar Jar Binks from, I believe it was Star Wars?
I believe so.
Okay. And truly, you've got Ruby Rhod from the Fifth Element. Good pose.
That's not T-pose, so I was like,
Look, we've already posed.
not
off.
about to be outposed in the first 10
Round
seconds
one,
of
the
this
pose
video.
off.
You're weak, you stink. Let's face it, you're a douchebag.
All right, T, 2 minutes. Starts right now, go.
Everybody hates Jar Jar Binks, including characters within Star Wars itself. Jar Jar was banished from his own tribe, for God's sake. And I can even cite our own selection process for this very bracket as evidence of the universal hatred of Jar Jar Binks. Now, before we started selecting, he was the first name to come up, but once it came time to actually pick our characters, he wasn't a first or even a second round pick. Why? Not because he isn't the worst. He's the Michael Jordan of terrible movie characters. It's because he's so much the worst that no one really wanted to be associated with him for the duration of the tournament. Plus, I think there's a certain idea that Jar Jar is almost too obvious of a choice. And I get that. When you put aside your own urges to be, contrary, basically, and unexpected, it's undeniable that Jar Jar Binks is the one true choice for worst movie character of all time. He's a war criminal, specifically a Star Wars criminal, because he permanently damaged the reputation and heritage of the Star Wars franchise. And not only is he an annoying dipshit, he's actually responsible for setting events in motion that allow the Sith to take over the Galactic Empire. It's only because of his speech that the Senate even agrees to give Palpatine the power he needed to later overthrow the Senate and rule the galaxy under a dictatorship. He's an enemy of democracy, and the worst part is, he's too useless to even be one on purpose. Now, if you just do a cursory internet search, that'll further prove the idea that Jar Jar Binks is the worst. Because let's say you were looking at some fan art, If you look at Ruby Rhod fan art, you'll get something like this, kind of nice. Glorifies the character, definitely proves that there are people out there who like him. You look for Jar Jar Binks fan art, you get this.
Everyone hates Jar Jar. Truly, you got 2 minutes. They're starting right now. Go.
Ruby Rhod is absolutely the worst character. Sure, his shrill pitch may only get on my nerves, and his countless repeating of the name Corbin feels like it might be a young actor's Meisner exercise, but only half of this blame falls on Chris Tucker. Ruby Rhod enters the movie more than an hour into the runtime and does nothing to drive the plot forward. Zero, zip, nothing but shrieking and forcing us to cut away from Bruce Willis using guns. And if you're gonna cut away from Bruce Willis using guns, you better have a damn good reason. This is a character that could be eliminated from the Fifth Element entirely, and the movie would require zero rewriting, only a Sharpie crossing him out of the script. And the movie would be better for it. Ruby Rhod is the equivalent of a mole I have on my back. It's dark brown and just kind of there. Roger Ebert, the late great American film critic, said this in his review of The Fifth Element. There is way too much of the tiresome disc jockey character late in the movie, when the plot should be focused on business. There's great stuff here, and the movie should get out of its own way. Whereas your character, Jar Jar, actually has an impact on the story. He takes the Jedi to the Gungans. He helps broker an alliance. He's even made a general. This is a character with a rich inner life that serves purpose to the story. Sure, maybe he was included by George Lucas for the children. Maybe? He absolutely was. The movie is PG and was made in 1999. And if it's not Pixar, that means it's a baby movie for babies. We were lying to ourselves. It was never for you with your grown-up sensibilities, even if you thought it was going to be, because the protagonist is an 8-year-old child. Jar Jar belonged in The Phantom Menace. He didn't make it worse because it was bad to begin with. He was the whipping boy we chose because we had this new thing in Star Wars, but we didn't like the Star Wars you got. You should be thankful he was in it, because that's how we got a new generation of Star Wars. This fall.
Time. T, your rebuttal to all that anger. 1 minute starts right now. Go.
Well, I would agree that, if you remove Ruby Rhod from The Fifth Element, it doesn't change the movie at all, which also means that it's impossible for him to single-handedly ruin the movie. I'm also not saying that Star Wars is like the prequels are great on their own, but Jar Jar, it's sort of like if you have diarrhea, which would be the Star Wars prequels, Jar Jar Binks is explosive. Like, he makes it explosive diarrhea. And I would rather just have regular diarrhea.
30 seconds.
Already? Jesus. All right, back to my cards then. Cosplay for Ruby Rhod, transcends race and gender. Whereas the cosplay crowd, once Jar Jar gets involved, you get this and this. Everybody hates Jar Jar because he's the worst.
Honestly, I think the second ones are more creative.
Well, yeah, because he inspires creativity because everyone loathes him.
On the subject of Jar Jar, the People vs. George Lucas grudgingly concedes that kids liked the silly talking goofball. And you know what? On rewatching last night, I have to side with him. A lot of what happens on screen in The Phantom Menace is boring. It's boring. Jar Jar is the personification of the audience, more interested in the world around him than what's happening right in front of him. And you know what? He's right. You should start poking around with those droids because that's the cool stuff, not that shitty Trade Federation. I don't blame him. But we did blame him because he was the new thing and we were afraid to say we didn't like it. He is not the worst character in the movie. He is not even the most racist character in that movie. And if that's true, then Jar Jar cannot be the worst character overall, which means you have to vote for Ruby. But even more importantly, Jar Jar is the progenitor of a dozen other characters who are all motion capped because Jar Jar proved that they could do it. The fact that you have unbridled hatred for him is the greatest vote of confidence because you saw him as an actual character. Those monkeys in your Planet of the Apes movies, Gollum, if you enjoyed those even one bit, you can thank Jar Jar for that technological step.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I'll agree that Ruby Rhod can be polarizing, but there are still people out there who will at least stand up for him and be like, you know what? I actually like Ruby Rhod. It's like this. Like, if you were in a relationship with someone and she was a huge fan of Ruby Rhod, that would be a character flaw, possibly, at worst. If she was a fan of Jar Jar Binks, it would be a deal breaker. Like, super into Jar Jar.
The fact is, it's easier to like Ruby Rhod. The two movies are actually very similar. The Fifth Element and The Phantom Menace both live in this sort of weird cartoony world for kids. Like, I like The Fifth Element, but that's because it didn't have movies 4, 5, and 6 coming before it, which is also stupid. Look, there's a lot of stupid things around this thing, but I still think Jar Jar got a raw deal. Look, he's got that stupid baby talk, but at least his vocal sounds aren't the same noises I make when I get my penis crushed in my blue jeans crease.
Is that what you so you're saying you sound like Ruby Rhod when that happens?
Come
I don't know. I think in the annoying voice contest, I actually have some backup here as well. I've got an audio aid.
Everybody talks stupid in that Star Wars movie.
It's
You want
true.
to talk bad characters? The king of the Gungans, that stupid little Middle Eastern boy that keeps trying to push the word wizard on us, Sebulba. All of these characters are bad. They are all bad. Every character in the Star Wars universe in The Phantom Menace is garbage, including the Jedi, including Natalie Portman. They're all garbage.
Right, but Jar Jar manages to bring down an already relatively bad
he is
movie.
only the one that is there, that is new, that we can be like, well, he's not a Jedi, so he's not going to grow up to be Darth Vader. You know what? I hate this guy. He's why these movies are ruined. You know what? Those movies are ruined because of George Lucas.
Do you want to listen to this all day?
Well, that smells stinkerwith.
I mean, come on. It's terrible. I'd rather listen to Ruby Rhod all day long.
Come
And
on,
honestly, if you have a problem with
oh
Ruby Rhod, that's a
That's
terrible Chris Tucker.
That's enough.
Yeah, I think the overarching thing here is that Ruby Rhod doesn't necessarily elevate nor tear down a movie that you can feel however you feel about it, whether he's there or not. Whereas Jar Jar Binks undeniably tarnishes the entire legacy of Star Wars.
Look, you cannot like Jar Jar Binks, but he is a much better character in a cinematic sense than Ruby Rhod. Ruby Rhod is an air sandwich. You bite in there, and there's nothing there but screams.
All right, everybody, get down in the comment section. Down there, you will find a comment that says, like this, if Jar Jar is the worst.
And he is.
Okay. And another comment that says, like this, if Ruby Rhod is the worst. No comment. Thank you for not interrupting me. Point is, let us know who won this thing or lost this thing, however you want to look at it. Who's the worst character, Jar Jar or Ruby Rhod? Also, make sure to get over to the other first round matchup that's out there today. It's Dr. Mann from Interstellar and Mr. Yunioshi from Breakfast at Tiffany's. Get over there, vote that one up. Come back next week for more Worst Wars and to find out who makes the semifinals.
Obviously, a character that inspires creation.